It's the realist.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your guy Realistic, and welcome to my tutorial vault. That's right, I'm gonna start grabbing some of my most classic tutorials over the years out of the vault and re-releasing them. That way y'all can enjoy, get your mixing and mastering skills back up. So if you find any of the information useful, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. That way this keeps showing up in your feed, and sit back and enjoy the content. Little disclaimer here, I'm just going to be talking about dynamic EQ for mastering in here, so I'm not going to be going over limiters, outboard gear, mid-side compression, bus compression, all that. I got tons of videos on that stuff, so I'll have some stuff pop up right there for you to be able to click on that if you want, or at the end of the video, you'll see it in the little video cards that pop up if you want to check out that. Right here, we're just talking about using a dynamic EQ on mastering. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to find, because we're dealing with mastering and dynamic EQ, what we're kind of doing is we're trying to lower some things that have too much of a bump or too much of a buildup. So I like to find a section of the song that has more stuff going on to it. So like you can see when we look at this wave file here, right? The beginning here, there's not really much going on. We could probably assume right here that there's not any drums or anything going on or any bass. We want to go with more like one of these bigger sections right here where we can clearly tell that there's more stuff going on, because we're working on mastering and we're working on some certain buildups, and we want to find that kind of area where a lot of stuff is going on. So let's go ahead and highlight that, and then we'll just put it on a loop and we'll start going. So I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here.
Like a tiny dancer, there's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love and
so we can hear a lot's going on there compared to, right, not a lot of action. So we'll definitely have more success if we hang out over here. So the EQ that I normally use is I use Pro Q3 for the dynamic EQ. I actually use two ones for mastering, but Pro Q2 is probably the one that a lot of people have, this or Neutron, as far as when it comes to dynamic capabilities. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm actually going to pull up the other one that I use in my mastering chain. I actually use both of these. But the reason why is because there's some attack and release parameters on here. So I also kind of want to show you that. But just know that you can dial this into, any dynamic EQ, with the exception, of course, if you're using Pro Q3, there won't be an attack and release. It does it automatically for you. But for the sake of this, I want to show you some attack and release stuff. So basically what I try to do here is, I don't want to do too many tweaks and stuff. I'm hoping a lot of that was corrected in mixing. So what I like to do is just, a couple bands, anywhere from 3 to 6 bands here and there. And just a lot of times I'm doing some narrow cues, just kind of, getting some little bumps and stuff out there. And I'm not trying to reduce by any more than 1.5 dB, 2 dB if it really needs some work. And a lot of times I'm even hanging out in like 0.5 dB, somewhere around there, because I'm just kind of doing light stuff. So the first thing that I kind of look for is I kind of listen and analyze of what could be better. So let's give this a little listen.
gonna hold me back, and I've been moving different since he told me that. Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answer.
Okay, so I'm just hearing right there, there's little things that we can clean up in the low end and just a little bit in that upper mid range. And maybe we can calm the reverb down a little bit too. And so what I like to do here with dynamic EQ is I like to do a combination of stereo, side, and mid. And that way I can control the mids, I can control the sides, and just the whole stereo field. If you want to know more about mid-side EQing, I do have a video on that, which I'll put up right up there for you to be able to click on if you want to watch that. But yeah, basically what I like to do is a lot of the lower end stuff I like to keep in the mid, because your kick and bass, that's usually going to be coming down the center. It's not too often that you're going to pan your kick or your bass. I'm sure there's exceptions, but yeah, I like to do that. And then a lot of times for the upper mid range, I like to just keep that stereo, so we're getting mid and side, because there's a lot of information that's coming down for both right there. And then what I'm doing right here with this side is I'm actually going to work on the reverbs a little bit, and a lot of times the stuff I want to wash out of the reverb is going to be on the sides. So let's go ahead and check out what I'm listening for here. one of the things that I noticed with the kick, there's just a little bit of a resonating frequency in the kick drum, about 105, somewhere around there. That could probably be tucked down a little bit. It just gets a little too much of an overtone. So I probably want to duck that out a little bit. So we'll start there. One of the things I like to do when it comes to mastering is I like to use this little headphone thing right here to zero out the frequency so I can really hear what's really resonating. It really lets me hone in on that. Okay, so it was actually 108. I was 3 hertz off, but we kind of heard a little bump right there, especially when that bass came in. So let me actually kind of highlight that in the mix here to have the bass come in. So now that we found that, what I'm gonna do here is I'm just going to lower down this right here by almost a dB. Again, we don't want to be too much with this here. We just want to be fairly subtle with this. So then the next thing that I'm gonna do here is we're gonna work on this threshold. I don't want it to be too compressed, so I want to kind of keep the threshold light to where I'm just kind of getting about a dB of gain reduction.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love and vent.
So you can see right there what I had with that threshold. It was pretty light. It wasn't too crazy. You don't want to do anything like this.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer.
So, because then it just compresses the whole time down. What I want to do is I want to keep this lighter to where it's just kind of compressing when it resonates too much, when the buildup is going a little too much.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making.
And you can even see right there that as it's going, it's really only compressing down when the kick drum is coming in. It's not really compressing down when the kick drum isn't going off. So that way we can still retain some other information in there. All right, so then the other thing is, what am I going to do with this attack and release? Well, what's really unique about dynamic EQ is a lot of times when it comes to mastering with compressors, we generally want to use a slow attack time and a medium or slow release time because we don't want to damage the transients. However, when it comes to dynamic EQ, it's a little bit different usually. You usually want to go with a faster attack time because we're just working on a resonating frequency or some harshness, so we kind of want to get in and get out really quick, right? At least that's what I was taught from my mastering teacher. I had studied under Greg from Rare Form Mastering for a while, and that's what he taught me. And when he explained it, is like it made sense because we're not compressing the whole signal. We're just compressing a really narrow area that's resonating too much, so we want to get in and we want to get out of there really quick. And so that's what he taught me, and he's also, he's mastered a bunch of stuff for Prince. He also did stuff for people like Miles Davis, Bill Withers, Muddy Waters, Laser Break. So to me, he just has a little bit more credibility than the guy later down the road and that's going to be in the comment sections of this video bashing me. He's got a little bit more credibility than that, right? So I trusted his word for it. If there is otherwise, maybe there is, but it's worked for him in the records he's worked on, and it's worked for me for the records that I've worked on, and it does make a lot of sense. But if you were going to do like some bus compression, yeah, you definitely want to do the slow attack time. But for this case, we're going to do a faster attack, and we're going to do a faster release.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love in Venice. When I pick, baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer.
And then as far as the numbers right there, just kind of, really use your ears, dial in, make sure it doesn't sound too compressed or it's not doing any pumping or anything. It usually shouldn't because you're dealing with such a narrow band, but just kind of use your ears. You can see I'm not quite going the fastest for the attack and release. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. I think there was some stuff going on in this 200 area, so we'll just kind of search around for that. Yeah, so there's just a little boost right there, a little bump right there that I just kind of want to tame and duck down. So we'll go ahead and bring that down here. Again, I don't want to go too crazy, so I'll probably keep that just a little bit under a dB here.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dance.
And for this one, I might do a little bit wider of a Q here. Again, these are things where you really got to use your ears. I did a pretty narrow Q for the low end here because there was just one area I want to attack. As I was listening to this next area here at the 342, I started to hear like, there's a little bit wider of an area that might need to be compressed down. So that's all I'm doing there. So you just want to trust your ears there. So you hear what I'm doing there versus the narrow. Okay, and then same thing here. We'll lower the threshold a little bit more just so I'm not like, compressing too much here. I just want to kind of just tame down those peaks. And you can see, too, it's just kind of pushing down when it gets a little too much there. And then we'll just adjust these attack and release.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love in Venice.
Okay, and then, too, I felt like some of the reverb was a little... it could be tamed a little bit, and so for that I like to kind of focus on the sides a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that. And you can see I got a little bit wider of a Q already set in place just because the reverb is going to take up a little bit more space. So just a little bit right there. The reverb wasn't too much on there, and it's not going in all different directions, but there's some things I'm hearing with the background vocals. There's also things that I'm hearing with some of the instruments in the background that could be tamed down a little bit. So again, we'll just be kind of subtle with this.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love in Venice. When I pick, baby.
And then the last thing I notice is there's just a little, I don't want to say harshness because the vocal isn't too harsh, but there's just a little area that I can tame up top here of the vocal here. But what I'm going to do here, you could, if you were just focusing on the vocal, you could do mid because usually the lead vocal is coming down the center. But at the same time, I think some of the hi-hats are kind of in that same area. So I'm just going to keep this going stereo. So I'm working on the mid and the sides at the same time. And basically what I was hearing there is just a little like wispiness. Probably just made up a word, but you get what I'm saying. There was kind of like a wispy sound that I just kind of wanted to duck out. And that's what's so perfect about these dynamic EQs is, I'm just less than a dB. I got a fairly narrow Q. I'm getting in and I'm getting out of there pretty quickly. So I'm not doing anything too noticeable. Just kind of, adding a little bit more of a more balanced and a little bit evening out more of a sound there. So that's all I'm really doing. So let's check this out.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love in Venice. When I pick, baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should.
Okay, and then the last thing here that I may do now that I'm kind of hearing the mix and the full context is just a little bit of this low end down here in the sub frequencies. I don't want to do too much because I still want to keep that punch, but I think that we could tame that a little bit. That way we can get a little bit more out of our limiter when we add that later. It will allow us to push it a little bit more.
Baby, homie.
And I think for this too, I like to do a little bit wider of a Q when it usually comes to the low end, just so it's not so like, just narrow, and it can sometimes be a little bit more smoother if you get a little bit wider of a Q down in that low end too, especially when we think about low end frequencies. They're usually wider waveforms versus little, short ones that we hear in the higher. Okay, yeah, I feel like 43 around there is pretty good for this one, and you can see I'm kind of, I'm under a dB still. I usually don't go too over that. If I do, it's at like a dB and a half. And then for this, I definitely want to turn down the threshold because it looked to be a little too much.
And for the sake of the low end, what I might do is I might not go as fast with the attack. I don't want it to be so apparent. And same with the release. I'm not going to go as fast with the release either. I'm not going super slow, and I'm not even really in the medium mark. But as you can see from other bands over here, I was going a little bit faster with those. So over in this sub frequency, I'm going to just kind of try to be a little bit more subtle with it, just because I don't want to push down too fast, and I don't want the release to come up too much, because I don't want to risk pumping it, especially since I am dealing with a wider cue.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love in Venice.
Okay, and then I'll bypass this.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love in Venice. When I pick, baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love in Venice.
Okay, I know it's subtle, but if you were really, listening to it, it's so cool, right? Because we didn't boost anything. We just cut a bunch of stuff. And by doing this, the record actually sounds clear and brighter, even though we didn't boost or enhance any frequencies. We just took some stuff out. And we didn't do anything by more than a dB. So it's pretty cool to be able to accomplish that with such subtleness and just stuff that gets in and out so fast and without having to boost. So now with that in mind, really listen for it. Listen to how it sounds without it, and then when I bring it in, pay attention to how the clarity improves and how things seem to be brighter.
Baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find the answers. I have a fantasy of making love in Venice. When I pick, baby, hold me closer like a tiny dancer. There's a lot of questions, we should find.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. That's what I love about dynamic EQs, and really just kind of being subtle with it is, and also mid-side EQ. Both of those together is just such a deadly combination where we can do little subtle things like that and enhance the record. And you see, we didn't do surgery. We didn't have to do much. The mix was already pretty solid. We're just kind of doing things to sweeten it up a little bit and kind of just add things. It's really just a second set of ears when it comes to that, or just a little bit different focus of using a different part of our brain.
And just one final thing to note when it comes to your dynamic EQ on your master channel, and it's really important, is your channel is probably not going to look like how I have it on here. You may not have to do 108. You may have to do 120 hertz or 130, or maybe it is 108. Maybe it's 105. Maybe it's 96. My point is every song's going to be different. So just because this is what I did on this particular track doesn't mean these are going to be the exact same settings. You may not need to do anything at all in the upper mid-range like I had to do here. Or you may have to do something up here to kind of reduce some of the sibilance or something. Maybe there's a lot of S's and T's that are really cutting through in the 7K range, and you may have to duck that out. Maybe the reverb has a really good balance and you don't have to do anything on the sides, or maybe the low end, there isn't any low end, so you don't have to do that. My point is this was just more to let you know really how you should use your attack and release, how you should set your threshold and your cues. And really the big thing that I want to show you is take a second, listen to the track, hear what the problem is, and then from there, all you want to do then is make the adjustments based on what you're hearing, not what you're seeing in this particular tutorial that I did on this particular song.
Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this tutorial. If you found it useful, be sure to like and subscribe because it does help the channel grow. When you like a video, it tells YouTube that you liked it and maybe other people will like it as well. And also be sure to check out my online mixing and mastering courses, the art of beat mixing, the art of vocal mixing, and the art of mastering, all available now. And if this video was helpful and you're looking for other videos, you can watch a video here, here, and here. All right, until next time, y'all.